It's our preseason prospect episode. On tonight's show, we'll discuss the prospects you need to know for the upcoming season, when to draft them, or when to pick them up on the waiver wire. We'll also talk about how projections treat and value prospects, and many more strategy topics too. James Anderson of RotoWire joins us on the award-winning Beat the Shift podcast, coming up next. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruvain Guy. What's going on, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Well, we have an exciting announcement to make. I really want to thank the FSWA, the Fantasy Sports Writers Association, who has named the Beat the Shift podcast as the best baseball podcast of 2024. Ruvain, congratulations to you. Really great work, fantastic work. Obviously, if you listen to this show, which you do, we give it our all, and thank you so much, Ruvain.
Yes, and congratulations to you, too. We both put in a lot of work for this, so we're very happy, but we also want to give a shout-out to the other podcasts who were nominated that did great jobs as well. They shouldn't be overlooked.
Oh, absolutely. No, I listen to a ton of podcasts, including the guest who we're going to have on in a second. But it really is a lot of work to do a show, and I mean, there's just the time to record the show. There's a ton of editing. There's also a lot of preparation. I mean, you know, we work hard at getting the right questions for our rundowns and doing the research. You know, a lot goes into, you know, what you hear, and I guess it paid off. So, you know, once again, congratulations, Ruvain, and to our audience, hey, we made it. We did it, guys. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the show over the past couple years, and please continue to listen. Great stuff as we won. I'm just so excited, Ruvain. You know,
yeah, it's a great thing, and one of the best parts of our podcast are the great guests that we have,
like the one we have on now. Well, he's been on our show before. Welcome from RotoWire is James Anderson. What's going on, James?
Hey guys, good to be on again. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. And today is our prospects episode. This is definitely the episode where I'm going to talk the least. And, you know, one thing about our show is we bring on the best guests to help us through all the areas of fantasy baseball, the areas of your game, the knowledge, the players, the strategy. And, you know, maybe I'm okay at strategy and, you know, auctions, obviously, and projections. That's our expertise. But I don't know anything about prospects. Ruvain knows a little bit more, so he'll probably lead a lot of the player discussion today. But, James, we're counting on you to help us through the strategy of prospects, how to use them, and who to look out for. So are you ready for this one?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, so first a little bit of strategy as always. And, you know, as a projection guy, I always think of prospects as just being a bust, to be frank. And projections are always going to show prospects' value as muted, just not as high as what the market is going to. The market's going to look very overvalued compared to projections. And it's because that, you know, 8 out of 10 prospects just are busts. Or if they're not busts, at least they don't hit the ground running right away, right? So, you know, Wyatt Langford didn't make it last year. Okay, you got that. You know, sometimes you get a Corbin Carroll. Oh, he's right away awesome. You got Juan Soto. He's right away awesome. But for every one of those, you know, Jared Kelenic, not much. You know, you get more there. So by probability, if you don't pick prospects, probably a good idea, and that's how I see it. But maybe you can convince me otherwise, James. And what is your opinion? Do I have it wrong about valuing prospects in general?
I think if you if you are someone that gets like very excitable about prospects, or if you're someone that doesn't know anything about prospects, I think you should like ignore them. If you know a lot about them, but if you know a lot about them and you come in knowing that most of them are going to bust and like expecting most of them to bust, but then like taking calculated shots, I think that can work out. and that's basically what I do. But I do think a lot of prospect analysts are way too excited about prospects and only really think about what can go right. So, there are certain prospects where I will roster them, like guys that'll go inside the top 300. But I'm very, very picky about the types of guys that I will roster there, and I'm much more likely to be rostering, like if we're talking about like a fab league, I'm much more likely to be rostering a player in year 2 or year 3 than in year 1.
Right. Ruvain, you have anything to add about using prospects in your draft? I know you do it with me, and we tend not to really grab. Although I remember one year we played in the NFBC, and you said, "Hey, grab Trey Turner. He's going to be the number 1," and we held on to him for the whole year, and he basically won us the league with his performance when he came up.
Yeah, well, the problem is you don't know how a player's minor league success will translate into the majors. Are they going to be able to hit? Is their power going to translate? Is their speed going to translate? And you don't know if these guys are going to be quadruple A players, not the triple A players who do really well, but in triple A, and they've graduated from triple A, but they just don't make it in the majors, and they're quadruple A guys. You mentioned Jared Kalenic. He doesn't have anything left to prove in the minors. He conquered triple A. Same like a player like Joe Adell a couple of years ago. He conquered triple A, but that doesn't always translate to the majors, and that's the risk you run of having a prospect on your roster if you have a limited roster to begin with.
So, like, take a guy like Jacob Wilson, okay? Prospect, he had 92 at-bats past year. He batted only 250, but his history in the minors, he's had very high contact rates, and ATC projections is showing him as a 276 batting average, which is actually really good. And in 15-team deep leagues, he's like a bench player. In mono leagues, he should be on your roster. How do you value prospects? And I'd say what aspects of the prospect is easily translatable and almost, not guaranteed, but is more likely to show up and you can count on them when they do come up to the majors?
I think the things that are most translatable are walks and strikes for batters and pitchers. So, like in the case of Jacob Wilson, I have no doubt that he will make contact at a very strong clip and have a very low strikeout rate, hit for one of the highest batting averages of all the rookies this year, if not the highest batting average of any rookie. But I have absolutely no interest in rostering him in like a main event. Certainly, there'd be a point in a draft champions where I would take him, but like I would rather roster like a Brian Rocchio, for instance, over Jacob Wilson because he's going to at least steal double-digit bases. So just the fact that Jacob Wilson projects for single-digit homers, probably fewer than 5 steals, it's just not the type of player I would put on any of my rosters.
Yeah. So, sometimes you have players who haven't made it to the majors yet. How do you determine if and when a minor league player will make it to the majors in a given year?
So in February, how do I determine if a guy's going to?
Yeah, I mean, like, remember last year we were talking and you're like, all right, I'll draft Paul Skeens. Like, he's going to hit, a month into the season, Pirates going to pitch him all year, and, pretty much you were right. How do you make that determination? Because that, to me, is going to say, yeah, of course you draft Paul Skeens this year, as opposed to somebody else where you might say, I don't know when he's coming up, don't bother, or his ceiling is not high enough, or he's risky. Like, how do you determine, just forget about how good he is, how do you determine when they're actually going to hit the majors?
It's really something I've learned through experience. Like at the end of the 2024 season, right away I was extremely confident in certain prospects being up very early this year based on how they finished that year and just team context and stuff like that. It's just, I put out articles all off season about best prospects to draft each year in redraft leagues. And for all those articles, I'm doing a ton of research and trying to read as much reporting as I can about what the team's saying. And each team has different tendencies when it comes to, rushing prospects, making them really languish at AAA. You obviously factor in the team depth chart, all that type of stuff. So it's so many different factors, and a lot of it's just kind of intuition.
Well, hasn't baseball given more incentives to have these higher prospects hit the majors sooner?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a prospect that you think is an okay bet to figure into the rookie of the year race, then there are incentives certainly. But the same incentives that used to exist for keeping a prospect down a couple weeks, that's still an incentive. So if you are kind of like, maybe he wins rookie of the year, we're not sure, we're not even sure we want to keep him up all year, then the incentive of keeping him down for a couple weeks still probably trumps the potential draft pick for the rookie of the year thing. But like, with guys like Wyatt Langford, Gunnar Henderson, just like the best of the best, like those guys are clearly going to start on the opening day roster because they are such strong candidates to win that rookie of the year award. So it is something that keeps the best guys in the mix to make opening day rosters.
And one more follow up to that, actually. Players like in the past, Jordan Walker, these minor league players who are, middle prospects or upper prospects, and they had this huge spring and they make the majors. Are they better bets, or should we stay away from them? Because their value is usually inflated during the course of draft season. Should we try to stay away from them or go with them at a certain price?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so case by case. I mean, I never drafted Jordan Walker that year. I never drafted Kalanick or Adele their years. It's kind of a feel thing for me. Like the Walker one just screamed everyone was overreacting to his spring, and then you factor in where the guy's getting drafted too. Like, so like last year I rostered Cedon Rafaela later in the spring when it started looking like he was going to make the Red Sox. But it's different taking a guy like that where he was going, compared to where Jordan Walker was going that year, right? So it's just how good do you think the player is? Like, what was your take on the player coming into spring? Like, sometimes guys win jobs where, like, going into spring, I just wouldn't have thought a guy was going to win a job, but had I known they were going to win a job, I'd have been very excited. Or, like, a guy might, like with Jordan Walker, like going into spring, I wasn't that excited. And then when the ADP gets to a certain point, it's such an easy fade at that point. So it's just more often than not, people are getting overreacting. But in a case like Cedon Rafaela, like winning a job, maybe a case like a Caleb Durbin this year, like if it looks like he's going to win a job, like that's changing the player's value because they were supposed to start in the minors, or maybe they were supposed to start in a bench role. So it's changing their role. So they are more valuable than they were before. But in the case of like the guys that are just making all kinds of headlines and shooting up because of the hype like that, it's usually smart to fade them.
Yeah, so take a guy like Victor Scott, who made it to the majors. He made the team at a spring training last year, and that pumped up his value. But if you drafted him, it didn't really go well. So maybe it is role as you're saying, but maybe it's a level.
But it's also like what I was saying, Ariel, is like it's everything, right? Like,
yeah,
I didn't like stuff about Victor Scott, so like him winning that job, like it's about the
pedigree,
player too.
It's a lot pedigree then.
Yeah, and I get into like I disagree with like Derek Carty about certain philosophies because to me it does matter like which prospect we're talking about because
right.
A lot of the times he'll cite the busts that I was never in on. And then he'll cite like Corbin Carroll or Ronald Acuna, guys that I was really in on. So I think you can predict this stuff better than just like a coin flip. But obviously, if you're not doing this as your full-time job, you might not feel that confident.
Yeah, so I guess the pedigree and your analysis matters. You're basically saying that, hey, Ariel, I said my opening comment of the podcast was that, prospects, and I'm pretty much repeating Derek Carty for you, right? Well, prospects don't do well, 7 to 10 are bust. You have, my whole line about everybody. But you're telling me that actually it's not 7 out of 10 because the 10 includes the busts of that you were never in on. You weren't going for Walker. You weren't going for Kelenic. You weren't going for these guys. So, no, your ratio is a lot better, right? But
right.
Is your ratio is it still good enough to draft? Like, I don't know. Are you? I guess you're a prospect.
So like last year, I was drafting Wyatt Langford all October and all November, and he ended up paying off those prices. But I think I ended up with him on one team after November. and he didn't pay off those prices. I think that was a team I shared with Todd Whitestone, if I'm not mistaken. But like it's all about the price. It's all about the player. Like you can like a player in the 200s, but then once they get into the 100s or the 150s or whatever, then you're off of them.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. Do you value prospects higher or lower if they come from certain organizations? Like, does the organization make a difference? And if so, which ones, higher or lower?
It's really on the margins. It's really all about the amount of plate appearances that I see being there. Certainly there are teams where, we know that like the Mariners, if they've got a really good pitching prospect, that's more interesting to me than if the Rockies have a really good pitching prospect. But
there are Rockies pitching prospects.
the Rockies actually have some really good pitching prospects right now, which is it's really
they're a couple years away.
Well, Chase Dolander might make the rotation.
This is why I'm doing the show, because I'm not familiar with it. This is my hole in the game here. I'm the value guy. I just don't know the people that are just not in my vision right now.
I mean, I don't think you have to know Chase Dolander, but like he is a controversial prospect among in dynasty leagues, because like I'm probably the lowest person on Chase Dolander because I care the most, I think, among people who rank prospects about the Coors factor. But like, it's just the Rockies, for what it's worth, do have some really good relief pitching prospects and starting pitching prospects.
And by the way, are you more inclined to take we're talking about like the draftable players? Are you more inclined to draft a prospect if they're a hitter or versus a pitcher? Does that matter?
Not. I will say this. I tend to find that the hitters, I guess maybe an archetype of prospect I'm most likely to roster is a under the radar pitching prospect who's going in like the 500s of draft champions. Like, I don't like the big names usually because that's going to lead to the guy being overpriced. And then the hitters, especially if a guy is fast, that's going to usually lead to him being overpriced. Like, I've just got to absolutely love the prospect if it's a hitting prospect for me to be paying top dollar for them. So I guess I'm probably more likely to, if I like for instance, Michael McCreevy of the Cardinals, Thomas Harrington of the Pirates, like these are guys that don't have that sort of big time name value, but they're extremely talented and they pound the zone. They've got really good command and they're cheap. So like those are the types of pitching prospects I'm going to go after.
And I agree with that. I would also add that when it comes to pitching and hitting prospects, I think there is a break between some organizations. Like the Dodgers, look how many starting pitchers they keep bringing up. And it's amazing. They just keep churning them out. That's why they have so many options. That's why if one pitcher goes down, another one come up. They just stick it. They plug it in. The Braves not this last couple of years, but before then, all the hitting prospects they all hit. The Rays, they find these pitchers you don't know where they come from, and they're throwing the stable of horses like they mentioned, and what I think the Yankees call that the stable of, or the Rays call them that, the stable of horses, and they just keep throwing out these pitchers who could throw 95 over or near 100, and I think that makes a difference if you decide to go between pitching and hitting prospects. That I think that's when the organization matters. I think that's when you have to see who has the right, which organization has the pedigree for the hitting prospects versus the pitching prospects.
The one thing though with the Dodgers, like they've got some good pitching prospects who I really like, who I don't think I can really draft because they're like 10th on the depth chart. Like I think
they're gonna get a chance though. They will get a chance to pitch just because the way it works is that how many rosters in baseball go through only 5 starters during the course of a year.
I know, but it's much more likely that like Noah Cameron of the Royals gets 20 starts than Justin Robleski of the Dodgers.
But are they worth more because they're on the Dodgers and they're better chance of getting wins and a better sustainability of success because they're on a better team?
It's got to be playing time at that level, right?
Yeah, like I mean, it's just like with all this stuff, it's not like he checked this box, like I have to take him. Like there's 10 factors always happening with all these guys, right? But I think with like a Justin Robleski, who I really like on the Dodgers, there's paths to him getting 15 starts, of course, but there's also paths to him making like 3 starts and mostly pitching as like a long reliever, So it's just kind of weighing those outcomes. Whereas like if I think a guy's sixth on the depth chart, it's just so much more likely that guy's going to get 20 starts. So if the skills are close, then I'm going to go with the guy that I think it's more likely to get the 20 starts.
All right, so before we do some players, I just have one question that I know I've asked you this before, but I just, as a value guy, I just never understood it. I don't play Dynasty, but, people always ask for, where's the Dynasty rankings? Where's the Dynasty rankings? Got to see it. I never got it because, number one, when you're playing Dynasty, sometimes you want to win, like, right now. And sometimes you want to win like in 5 years from now where you're rebuilding, or maybe you're a year or two away. So I feel like, there should be dynasty rankings for like every single time level of when you expect to win or to play, right? Like you can't just have one size fits all. And my other question about dynasty rankings are, and it's more like a rankings versus value. Like how do you value like a dollar amount? You play in a 15-team league. Okay, what's the number 1 pick versus the number 7 pick? Like, how much of a dollar difference? Is he 10% more valuable? Like, what's the difference between number 17 and number 44? Is that $2 worth of difference? Like, how close are they? I like seeing things in terms of dollars. I never got that, and I have no idea how that works in dynasty rankings. So maybe you could take a stab at these questions, James.
Sure. Yeah. So dynasty rankings are just the bane of my existence. They're probably the least favorite part of my job. That's not like clerical, stuff. Just because I never think they're good. And during the pandemic, Ariel, I actually did release a set of win now rankings and play for the future rankings. And I thought that turned out great. But so I just put out a set of dynasty rankings at the very end of January, and people are asking, when are your next set of dynasty rankings coming out? Like that's how much people want another update. It's like,
I know.
What do you think has changed in the last month? Like some stuff's changed, but I'm not going to just update the dynasty rankings once a month. So like, yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think it's much more. Like the dynasty rankings do serve a purpose because people can sync with RotoWire using my leagues, and it just makes it so easy to see like any notable free agents that might be available in your league, that type of thing. So they definitely have a purpose, but like caring about a guy being ranked, 280 versus 340 or whatever on the dynasty rankings, like that's pointless basically. And then in terms of like where are the kind of dollar gaps, it's extremely tilted to the top. I did actually a dynasty startup auction this offseason, and like it was 15 of us. We had $200 to buy 10 players a piece, and so like Shohei Ohtani and Bobby Witt both went for 100 or more. So like 50% of someone's budget basically, and like Juan Soto, Gunnar Henderson, Kyle Tucker, Julio Rodriguez, these guys are going for like extremely high prices in the 70s. So like it's extremely tilted towards the top, the superstars, the young hitting superstars.
Well, that really helps. No, thank you very much for that. So let's talk about impact prospects for this coming season because we're fantasy focused, and we'll talk a little bit in the end about next year, maybe for some dynasty players. But let's talk about this year. So who, first of all, are the top impact prospects for early 2025? We're talking somebody who's going to make the opening day roster or maybe come up a month, 6 weeks later. So you should obviously be drafting them in 15-team leagues.
Do you want to skip over guys that were up last year, or do you want me to include those guys?
Well, actually, that's a good question. When is it that a player stops becoming a prospect and it becomes an actual rookie or not on the prospect list anymore? When does that happen?
For hitters, it's 130 at bats. For pitchers, it's 50 innings, and then I and MLB also use 45 days on the active roster.
So I mean, I think answer that how you like. If you think that somebody's worth mentioning, then
well, so
mention
like
him,
I think that the top 3 prospects this year are guys that everyone knows about. We don't need to spend much time on them. Like Roki Sasaki, Dylan Cruz, Jason Dominguez, all going well inside the top 200. But Cruz and Dominguez we've seen in the big leagues. Sasaki, everyone kind of knows what's going on there.
Sure.
So those three guys are sort of the ones going in the top 200. I haven't drafted any. I drafted Sasaki before it got reported that he was coming over, but I haven't drafted him since his stock increased. And then I haven't drafted Dylan Cruz yet, just because of the price. And then I did draft a little bit of Jason Dominguez very early in draft season. But then there's this next group of guys that is very difficult to value. You've got Matt Shaw with the Cubs, who has a very fantasy-friendly skill set, power, speed, hit tool. He's probably going to be there every day, third baseman, assuming that he gets over this oblique thing. It sounds like he's going to get into a game this weekend. I haven't drafted him yet, but he is a trendy player to go after for some power and speed at third base. Matt Shaw of the Cubs. The guy that I'm probably the highest on of any of the guys going anywhere near the top 300 is Bubba Chandler of the Pirates, right-handed pitching prospect. I was all over Jared Jones last year. I thought he was going to make the rotation out of camp. I think the same thing's going to happen with Bubba Chandler. And I think he's a better prospect at this moment than Jared Jones was a year ago. I think he's just going to make the rotation. They've had a lot of success doing that. He was dominant over a long stretch at AAA to close last year, and he was going, 6 innings a lot of the time, so it wasn't like he was going 4 innings and being babied or anything like that. He's got a full pitch mix. He throws enough strikes. I know the projections, for whatever reason, don't like Bubba Chandler that much. But
Negative $10 is what ATC values him at.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think he's very affordably priced. Well, actually, no, I take that back. He's not affordably priced. Like he's appropriately priced. Like I think, to me, I would take him straight up over Jackson Jobe, no questions asked, and he's going behind Jackson Jobe. Kumar Rocker, I think, is interesting, but I do think he misses out on a rotation spot. Probably not going to throw more than like 120 or so total innings this year, Kumar Rocker. So if 40 of those come at AAA, I think it's tough for him to be worth his price tag right now. And then you got those 2 Red Sox prospects, pretty much universal top 5 prospects, Roman Anthony, Christian Campbell. I do think kind of the tea leaves suggest that Christian Campbell, to me, has a decent chance to be the second baseman there.
No Bregman, right?
I think eventually it's going to be Campbell at second. Yeah. I mean, the team obviously wants Campbell at second and Bregman at third.
Well, he did play a little bit outfield in the minors also. I mean, when do you think those two guys... That would be great if they didn't already have 5 outfielders. So, like, Roman Anthony's an even better prospect, but he's an outfielder. So it's not like Christian Campbell's going to play the outfield over Roman Anthony. So let's say July 1st. What do you think the outfield for the Red Sox looks like?
Duran, Anthony, and an Abreu, Rafaela platoon.
That's very interesting because those 2 guys I think those are the 2 hottest guys. Now listen, when it comes to prospects, the reason why I know even a little bit about it is because my son collects baseball cards. And if you collect baseball cards, you always want to get the first card of all these rookies and everything like that. So I hear about these guys. I heard of Roman Anthony. He's been coming. He's 20, but he's been coming for a while. What are the Orioles? I'm going to keep it in the AL East. What are the Orioles going to do with Samuel Basallo?
Send him to the minors for indefinitely.
And then what?
I mean, I just don't think he's. I think he's going to spend like basically as much time at AAA as Kobe Mayo did last year.
So want to just get a little strategy question here, if I can interject. So, Bubba Chandler, and by the way, I apologize. He's not worth -10. He's worth -6. I was preparing for labor.
You're selling him short.
Short. I'm preparing for mixed labor, which is a 12-team auction, so I just had him up here. But he's -6 in a 15-team league. If you're drafting him in your leagues, obviously you're hoping that he makes the rotation. I guess if he doesn't, does that mean that you hold Bubba Chandler, or do you cut him right away? Like I'm asking, like what is the tactic that you use right there?
Um, in a 12-teamer, I would probably cut him right away, and in a main event, I would hold him until I needed to cut him.
Right, right. Which could be quick if you have injuries, of course. I guess Rocker would be the same. I mean, right? Very similar.
Yep, yep.
Right. Okay.
Actually, I wouldn't hold Rocker. I would cut him in either format.
Got it.
Are you quicker to cut the pitchers than the hitters? You giving the hitters a little bit more of a leash, or you just have more confidence the hitters will stay up there or get more playing time? What's the story?
I don't think it's about whether they're hitters or pitchers. I think it's about the perceived upside, like the perceived payoff, and then the like what do I think like how long do I think they're actually going to be in the minors, right? Um, like Bubba Chandler like has absolutely nothing to do at AAA other than just wait until the Pirates are ready for him to join the rotation. So I wouldn't expect him to be there very long at all. But if Roman Anthony gets sent down, I mean, like I'm not drafting Roman Anthony because I do think he's going to start the year in the minors. So I don't want to have to make that decision. But like Roman Anthony could be at AAA for months. So it's just when do I think they're going to be up, and then how much payoff do I think there is if they are up is going to determine if I hold them or not.
Okay, so let's go through some of the people coming up later. So those are the early ones that you mentioned so far. What about people that you think are going to come up mid 2025? So we're talking like June, July, not like late cup of coffee kind of guys, but someone's going to come up, middle of the year, 2-3 months in, and then that could be actually an impact on your team.
Could we hit on like a few more guys that have
Oh,
a chance to be
oh,
up?
please.
Earlier?
Sorry. No. Let's go with that. Yes, please,
Well,
please.
yeah, because I just don't think it's that like I don't think it's a great prospect class to be looking like 3 months out. So like Michael McGreevy, who I mentioned earlier, and then Quinn Matthews, two Cardinals pitchers, have both looked fantastic this spring, and certainly look like they're going to be better than the guys at the very back of that rotation. So I think like watching McCreevy and Matthews this spring, I mean, I think McCreevy's going to make the rotation. He was already awesome last year in the big leagues, but Matthews looks really interesting. And then Sean Burke with the White Sox is a guy that I've been loading up on. Just think he something clicked when he got with the big league coaches last year. The stuff like just really graded out well. He shut down a Padres lineup that was at full strength last year. I think he had like 8 Ks against the Padres, and he's going to be in the White Sox rotation. He could strike out 150 guys this year. And then Seth Halverson, I think, is the best bet to lead the Rockies in save. He's technically a prospect. Yeah, I guess now we could get to some guys that might be up a little bit later.
Yeah, Seth throws like 102 miles an hour. He's definitely my money is on him for being the Rockies guy. If you want to take a stab at a Rockies potential closer,
Right.
That's another story. But yeah, I agree he's the guy. And by the way, we should have had you on earlier this year before I did my draft and holds, because I would have definitely taken chances on all the guys that you would have that you mentioned before, because the ATC projections will show them all as what the hell are you doing, right? That's where and projections. I guess it's a blind spot of projections because they're going to mute prospect as it is, right? That's why I know I do projections and I love projections and I do think that's the way to go, but you also have to know how to use them. And for prospects, they just don't point out the stuff that other people like you can, and you need the soft information way above everything else, I think, right? Is that how you use it?
Yeah, exactly. Like I use projections with prospects. Like I did a big top 100 prospects for 2025, and for each prospect I included one ATC projection. It was usually K- walk for pitchers or WRC plus for the hitters, just so that people kind of got a sense of like this is what the projections think of this guy. That obviously isn't everything, but that can allow you to sort of be like, the projections think Christian Campbell's 10% better than league average already as a rookie. That's interesting, right? Like
Yeah.
the projections think that Caleb Durbin of the Brewers would probably steal close to 30 bases if he had a semi-regular run. Like they can point out stuff like that, but
And I know, like, Todd Zola came out with an article on RotoWire the other day about, like, ATC projections. Let's take a look at the ATC 600. Like, ignore the playing time because, like,
right.
Campbell comes out as a great player according to ATC on a per at bat basis, but only have projected for like 240 at bats. So if you take a look and you do the projections and assume everybody gets like 600 plate appearances, you then can see the actual players that bubble up in terms of skill. So that that kind of thing is really something that you really should do if you want to pick out prospects who might hit. And, then if you think that the 240 is low, well, now you've got a guy that projections undervalue, not because of skill, but because of playing time.
And that's an exercise I use every offseason is I go to the Steamer 600 and I go team by team and just see like what does Steamer think like the best hitters on this team are, right? And like for instance, Chase Mydroth of the White Sox, he doesn't have any power, he doesn't have any speed, but he could play middle infield. And I think Steamer back in the middle of the offseason had him as like the White Sox like top 3 like position player. So like that stuff's useful, especially in like these bad teams. If like their 600 plate appearance projection makes them like a 4th or 5th best player on the team, that's noteworthy.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to prospects later in the year. I guess we can do all of them. Like, who's an impact prospect that can come up later in the year that maybe you're not going to hold now, but look out for in Fab somewhere in the middle of the season?
Yeah, so I've noticed, or I've mentioned a couple of these guys already, but Noah Cameron with the Royals, I think he's got really good combination of like it's kind of more like number 3 starter stuff, but he has advanced command. Like he's ready, I think, to have success as a big league starter. Had a lot of success at AAA last year. He's not going to make the Royals rotation out of spring training, but I think he's a better bet to finish the year in the Royals rotation than someone like a Michael Lorenzen or a Kyle Wright. So I expect Noah Cameron to finish the year in the Royals rotation and be pretty serviceable. Will Warren of the Yankees is someone who's I had a lot of last year. I got a lot of him again this year, and he might be breaking out in spring training. I don't think he's going to make the rotation, assuming Clark Schmidt can get up to speed. But I don't think the Yankees actually want to use Marcus Stroman as a starter anymore. So I think
he does. He does though.
I know he does.
He's been very adamant about it too.
Yeah, but I think that's probably working against him, and I think Will Warren might be the guy that like is 6 on that depth chart. So if Clark Schmidt's not able to get up to speed, maybe Will Warren's up earlier. But he's very interesting. Alan Roden, like Ariel, this is a prospect you might be able to warm up to. Like he is very statistically sound. He's a Blue Jays outfielder, someone that they've kind of been pumping up already this spring. But he's got a 108 WRC plus per ATC. Alan Roden does, so I think his bat is ready. He doesn't have a ton of power, but he can steal some bases. He might end up leading off for them even at some point if George Springer puts up another like sub 330 OBP. And then Thomas Harrington, who I mentioned with the Pirates, he's I think he's probably gonna open the year at AAA, especially after the Andrew Heaney signing. I do think Bubba Chandler beats out Bailey Falter or whoever you think is 5th behind Heaney, but I do think Thomas Harrington will join Bubba Chandler in that Pirates rotation before too long, and he's just got some of the best command in the minors. Like of my top 100 prospects, the 3 pitchers probably with the best command are Andrew Painter, Michael McCreevy, and Thomas Harrington. Obviously, everyone knows about Andrew Painter, but McCreevy and Thomas Harrington, like they could be, they could maybe follow like a Brandon Pfaadt type of path, where it's not just the loudest stuff, but they've got like 1+ secondary pitch, and they just pound the zone. So Thomas Harrington. Actually, with Harrington, it's that he's got like 4 average or better pitches. McGreevy's just got the one really good slider and then the elite command. But yeah, that's a decent group of guys.
You mentioned Andrew Painter. What can we expect from him? And he hasn't pitched really since 2022, I think it is. What can you expect from him? Should people even be thinking about rostering him to this year? What's with him?
I think he'll probably make 12, 15 starts. So if you think that, like, I would basically evaluate what do you think the likelihood of 12 starts from Andrew Painter this summer are worth to your team. And if you want to pay whatever his price is for those 12 starts, then go for it. But I don't think you should be expecting more than 12 starts from Andrew Painter in the big leagues this year.
Interesting. No, this is good stuff. But I was gonna say the Pirates, man, they've got a lot of young arms. Skeens and Jones already, and a couple more that you mentioned. That's looking good for the Pirates, huh?
Well, it's looking good on the rotation front.
On the rotation front, right?
Yeah.
Everywhere else. They haven't signed a multi-year. Did I hear correct? They haven't signed a free agent multi-year deal in like 15 years or something like that. You hear that? It's crazy. They signed Brian Reynolds for like a longer term, but not a free agent coming. That's crazy. Well, there you go.
What about the Reds? What about the Reds pitching? Because they always seem to have another fireball coming up. All of a sudden, has like he throws 95. Like I think Rhett Lauder. What do you think about the Reds pitching coming up?
Well, Rhett Lauder is definitely not a fireballer. They don't have anyone coming like a Hunter Green or a Nick Lodolo. The most interesting Reds guys for me are potential relievers, just because I think Alexis Diaz is ready to cough up that job. Like Zach Maxwell, I think could be the Reds closer in a couple years. He's probably not ready to be the closer this year, but Zach Maxwell's one of my favorite Reds pitching prospects. I think I've heard that Connor Phillips figured some stuff out towards the end of last year on the backfields in Arizona, but I still think Phillips, like, you're more likely to have him turn into a closer than a good starter for the Reds. So not a ton to see there. I mean, like the thing with Rhett Lauder is he's kind of a boring, like, number 4 starter if it all works out, but I don't really want that in Great American Ballpark.
All right, well then let's talk about a fireball. Let's talk about our Mets. Brandon Sproat. What can we expect from him? Is he going to be in AAA the whole year? Are they going to wait and try to maybe bring him up toward the end of the year? What do you think is going to go on with him?
At the rate of injuries, it's going to be Tuesday.
That's true.
Well,
also. But...
yeah, I mean, I had Jeff Zimmerman on the pod a couple weeks ago, and he suggested that Sproat might be a dark horse to break camp, just like you said, at the rate of the injuries there. But
at this pace, they're going to call me to be on the Mets.
Right. I don't think we see that. I think they've got enough. Well, actually, I don't know, man. Like Senga, I don't really trust Senga, so I honestly would not rule out Sproat being up right away. I think Blackburn would be in over him for sure. But, like, if they don't have enough, including, like, McGill, Canning, and Blackburn, I think it would be Sproat over, like, Jose Urena or Brandon Waddle or whoever.
Jose Urena. Oh.
So like
they just signed him today too.
I mean, that's just minor league.
Well, he pitched.
But I do think
last year.
I do think it's really noteworthy that Sproat added a sinker. He has, like, big time velocity with his 4-seamer, but it's got pretty bad shape. So I am encouraged by the fact he's adding a sinker, and I haven't been drafting him, and I probably won't draft him. But if he were to be in that rotation, I think you're going to see a lot of fab spent on him, obviously, because of the team context there and the name value.
Interesting. I want to keep it with the Mets. There's one other guy. This is not a pitcher. I don't know what they're going to do with him, but Jet Williams. He was ready last year, and he would have been up if it wasn't for an injury. So what do you think his role is going to be? Because he will most likely be up. There will be an injury. He's going to come up, or Starling Marte will break down. Something's going to happen. Where is he going to play? What's his, what positions are going to have him play at, and how much value do you think we're going to get out of him?
Trade bait?
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I really like, Jet Williams. I've been like the high guy on him for a long time. I think I maybe am not anymore, or I might still be, but he's just missed so much time. And the idea of Jet Williams is kind of, it's almost more theoretical than anything we've actually seen him put on paper, because he has this ridiculous control of the zone. He's a very short, very athletic, very fast shortstop, for those who don't know. But he's got this really small strike zone. He's incredibly patient, but he's almost sort of too patient. Like, he knows the zone better than the umps in the minors do. And so, like, we haven't seen Jet Williams really try to put his power to work against upper level pitching, because he just hasn't been swinging the bat that much and he hasn't been healthy that much. So I actually don't think Jet Williams is going to be up early this year. Maybe late in the season. I just think what he needs most is like a full year facing upper level pitching in the minors.
Interesting. And keeping in the New York state of mind, you mentioned Jason Dominguez. He did play a little bit at the end of last year. We have a sort of idea how he's going to play, because the Yankees last year, when they brought up Anthony Volpe, they just kept him there and they let him play because he was one of their top prospects. So we can, I think, assume that they're going to do the same thing with Jason Dominguez and just keep him in the outfield and let him play and go through the growing pains. But a guy who a lot of the New Yorkers, New York Yankee fans actually, were calling for last year, a guy named Spencer Jones, the tall first baseman. I think, in my opinion, I think Paul Goldschmidt is just a placeholder for him. Could you see a way that Spencer Jones gets to the majors this year if Goldie breaks down? And is he a guy to think about in dynasty leagues to try to acquire because of the fact that he may just inherit the first base job at Yankee Stadium?
Well, quickly on Dominguez, like, I think if you could just guarantee me Dominguez plays like 145 games, I think you get 20 steals and 20 homers out of him and a okay average. My biggest question with him is, if the defense is really bad, like, how long is his rope? Because at least with Anthony Volpe, like, the defense was never like bad to the point where they were thinking about making a change. But Dominguez is he's a bad, like, so far he's been a bad defensive outfielder. So, like, they don't really have someone that I think should play over Dominguez. But I could also see Aaron Boone getting sick of watching Dominguez mess up plays in left field. So it's all about, like, how much of a hold does he have on that job to me. Like, the production from Dominguez is actually kind of pretty easy to project to me. And he's performed in the big leagues already at a 2020 clip. So Spencer Jones, I think, I don't know if he's that overrated anymore. I've thought he was one of the most overrated prospects for a long time. I think he led qualified AA hitters in strikeout rate last year. So I'm not really factoring him into any plans in any league because I just don't roster him anywhere. But I know there's videos going around that he's changed his swing, but, like, he changed his swing for a reason, because he was striking out a ton. So, like, it doesn't mean that he's fixed that.
By the way, how'd you get into doing prospects, James?
It was just something I was passionate about. I already worked at RotoWire and already worked on the baseball team, and I just kind of made it my own.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Ruven, but before we go on to just a couple of people for, like, next year for Dynasty guys, anybody else to ask around the majors of your interest, Ruven?
Yeah. This guy on the Blue Jays, the guy who was suspended last year for steroids, Orelvis Martinez, the second baseman. He's hit 45 homers in the minors in the last 2 games, and he missed a big chunk because of steroids. He's already had so far a big spring. Do you think we're going to see anything out of him? And is Jackson Jobe this is a completely different player, but Jackson Jobe, do you think he's going to be just a number 5 starter, or do you think he can elevate his stuff and be like a 3 or even a 2?
Yeah, with Orelvis, if he was a better defender, I think it would be easier to project him too. The Blue Jays just have a real collection of basically big league ready position player prospects that kind of makes it tricky to, project who's going to get the playing time. I think, like, Orelvis Martinez has the most impactful bat of the bunch, but Addison Barger is in camp competing for a role. Will Wagner's in camp competing for a role. I don't know if they're willing to take that hit on Martinez's defense really early in the year, but yeah, I mean he could hit 20 homers if they were willing to just give him the job. The power is legit with him. I'm not that concerned about the steroid. I'm more concerned about his defense than the steroid thing with Relvis. And then with Jackson Jobe, I've been down on Jobe this draft season, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with Jobe's pure stuff. Like he obviously has really good stuff, but like if it weren't for his name value, nobody would be drafting him where he is right now based on what he did last year at Double-A. Like the walks were a problem last year at Double-A for Jackson Jobe. He didn't build up his innings. I still don't think he's got a 100-inning season under his belt. So, like, could he be a better strike thrower this year than he was last year and take a leap and just like be ready to be a 5 to 6 inning a start pitcher in the big leagues? Like that's possible, but I just think there's so many other ways that it can go wrong with Jackson Jobe, and he's getting drafted in the mid 200s where you can get Nestor Cortez where Jackson Jobe is going. Like give me Nestor Cortez 10 times out of 10 over Jackson Jobe.
And there's three more players I just want to mention in the National League West. Dalton Rushing. He's the prospect catcher for the Dodgers. He's blocked the catcher, obviously, by Will Smith. He's played a little bit in the outfield. Is he going to make the majors this year? And is Ethan Salas going to be the first 19-year-old catcher in the majors in forever? And the Diamondbacks, Jordan Lawler. Is he going to get some love from the Diamondbacks this year?
So Rushing, I think, is one of the most confusing prospects to value because he's so incredibly blocked, barring a Will Smith injury. Like if Will Smith were to miss time, like Dalton Rushing's going to play. It's not going to be Austin Barnes. So like that would just be great for Dalton Rushing's value. But if Will Smith doesn't get hurt, I just don't know how Rushing plays this year. And I think it's almost more likely that he would get playing time after getting traded for a controllable ace or something at the deadline than that he would get playing time for the Dodgers, again, barring a Will Smith injury.
Like Keibert Ruiz.
Yeah, like, I mean, he's a better prospect than Keibert Ruiz, but, like, exactly. Like, they could get anything they want at the deadline for Dalton Rushing. Jordan Lawler, I think they kind of want him to just sort of like force the issue, and then they're sort of banking on the idea that they're going to find a spot for him. Maybe there's a spot, but it would basically have to be somewhere in the infield. So that would mean they move Perdomo to like a super utility role, or Eugenio Suarez is slumping really hard or something like that. But like, I just think if you're taking Jordan Lawler, it better be a draft and hold, or it better be like an online championship where you're ready to cut him right away. I do not think he's a good main event player at all. But I do think there's upside there. Like Jordan Lawler does have the power speed that we're chasing. So like if the price is right, or if you pick him up when he gets the call, that could turn into something. Quickly, Ethan Salas, I don't think will be up this year, and if he is up, he's going to tank your batting average.
All right, almost out of time here, but any quick prospects to let us know for Dynasty guys that might be, impacts for 2026?
Yeah, I mean, my number one overall prospect is Sebastian Walcott with the Rangers. I know a lot of people have Anthony number one. I just think Sebastian Walcott's the only prospect who has played in full season ball that I think has first-round pick upside, and just don't see that with Anthony, don't see it with Dominguez, don't see it with Campbell. But like Sebastian Walcott has that sort of Fernando Tatis type of blend of raw tools and just insane age to level production last year. Like his assignment to high A as a very young 18-year-old was one of the most aggressive assignments I've seen, and he was bad for 2 weeks and then he was awesome. So I'm very excited about Sebastian Walcott. I know he's already turning heads this spring, so maybe he's up late this year, but he's the superstar I'd bet on among all prospects.
All right, very cool. All right, Ruvain, you have any injuries to report on some prospects?
Only a couple. Drew Gilbert, who's one of the prospects for the Mets, he got him in from, I believe, from the Astros. He said he's not fully recovered from his hamstring issue that derailed his 2024 season. He said it's nothing. He, quote, "It's nothing serious at this point. Sometimes injuries linger a little bit." So he's a guy to watch for because he does have that power aspect and
Did he
speed
homer
as well.
today? I think.
He did he homer? I believe he
Yeah, I
did.
think he did.
But it's still he said it's still lingering just a little bit. So they tested him out and see how he's gonna do. River Ryan, Ricky Tiedemann, if you have them, they're not gonna play this year. They're both out this year for surgeries. But those are guys to think about for possibly next year and the year and beyond. And James, you mentioned Matt Shaw. He's got the left oblique soreness. He is day to day. I think he already started hitting in the cage again. He could start playing again. I think if he didn't today, so it's just maybe even over the weekend, and we'll see how he goes from there.
All right. Well, this was just an episode where I didn't really say much, and I love it because I love to learn. And a lot of the guys that you mentioned today, I'm going to look into a little bit more, James, now and see if I might squeeze them in. Not on my 12 teams for most of these, I would assume, but for some of the old, later ones, and of course later on the wire if they come on. So thank you so much for James for coming on. Maybe why don't you just tell everybody where we can listen to you, read you, and everything, James Anderson.
Yeah, rotowire.com. If you don't have a subscription, rotowire.com/pod. I'll get you a trial without a credit card. Everything gets tweeted at RealJRAnderson, both on Blue Sky, Twitter.
All right, Ruvain, what about you?
You can follow me on Twitter, X, at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out injury updates as they come. They're coming fast and furious now as all the minor league games are going on and people start to ramping up. You're going to see more injuries. You can also catch my injury article for RotoBaller every week during the season, which should be starting toward the end of March, discussing all the injuries and the next man up.
And I'm Ariel Cohen. You can see my work over at Fangraphs, over at RotoBaller. The ATC projections are up on Fangraphs, on RotoBaller, on Yahoo Sports, and at RotoWire. And you can follow me on Twitter at ATCNY. And you can listen to us each and every week on, I'm so proud to say, Ruvain, on the award-winning Beat the Shift podcast. That is the first time I've said that. But yes, the award-winning Beat the Shift podcast. So amazing. Tune in next week as we're going to go on with our previews and we'll do some relief pitchers, I believe. So stay tuned for that. All right, once again, thank you so much, James Anderson of RotoWire, for coming on the show. And from all of us here at Beat the Shift, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.